All right, today we're going to pick up with Shemot, also known as Exodus, chapter 34, verse 18. We've been kind of slow on this one. Kind of been on a tear lately, I guess. I do apologize for putting you through these things, but anyway. This one, literally in English, would basically say, Feast the unleavened bread, you shall keep 7 days, shall eat unleavened bread, that command I you to appointed time, new moon the Aviv, for in new moon the Aviv, go forth you from Mitzrayim. We've had all of this before, right? Because we're right back where we started, Rob. What's up with that? Well, the way the Torah was put together, I know that there's a guy, Dwight Pryor was teaching it, David Bibbin was teaching it, some guys like that they're both from America, and I think they spend a whole lot of their time in Israel, and they're part of that whole, what's that thing called? Oh, I don't remember. It's, they got a kind of a consortium over there, they get Jewish-speaking theologians and scholars together to study the New Testament. They get legitimate, hardcore rabbis to come in there and look it over and try to see what the Jewishness behind it was. Mostly not because the rabbis believed in the New Testament or Jesus, because for the most part they don't, but because it is a very good source of Second Temple Judaism. And that's how they sold him on the idea of coming in and studying this thing. But there for a while, and of course this was kind of worldwide on the stage for a while. Everybody started teaching about the J document and the Y document, or whatever the heck it was, and there was a D and an E and a EIEIO. I don't know. There was all these different documents, they were saying, that were all slammed together in random fashion, and that's where we get our Torah. Well, all of that teaching has been disproven. Now, does that make these guys dumb or false teachers or what? No, it doesn't do that. See, that's the thing about scholarship, is that we go by what we know today. And in the time that they were teaching that stuff, it seemed like sound scholarship. It didn't hold up. It didn't stand the test of time. As it turns out, the Torah was written very purposeful. It was put together in a very specific manner to achieve a very specific goal. And that has, in fact, been proven and will, I'm pretty sure, stand the test of time. And you've heard me talk about it from time to time when I bring up Kasuto, because he's just a fabulous source of showing you why that thinking was wrong. He's not the only one, by the way, but he was a really good source of that, as was Flusser, because they realized, they caught on. They realized that the Bible, the Hebrew Bible, speaks in generalities, and then it speaks in specifics, right? So we start off in chapter 12 just getting the general idea of the law. And then we get to here, all the way here to verse 34, it's coming back up. And you're getting a little bit more information this time than you got the first time. Now, we're going to go on to another, the following book. You got Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus. So when we get into Leviticus, using the English words for it, it's going to come back up again, maybe more than once. And then the next book, it'll come up again, and the next book, it'll come up again. And generally speaking, it's not so much that it gets deeper every time. It's just that we need to hear it again and again and again and again for it to really sink in and for us to really understand it, because sometimes we need to hear these messages over and over and over again, because there is literally so much information packed in every word. And then you put every word together in a sentence, and it can be mind-boggling. And then you put the sentences together in paragraphs, it's mind-blowing. And then you go, you know what I'm saying, right? it's steps. It's stepping you up, getting you, maybe you're stepping up, but as you step up, you're getting deeper and deeper. You're getting a better understanding. So the repetitiveness of it was done on. So we're repeating a law that we've already heard. It starts off with et, which is a pointer. It doesn't have any meaning in Hebrew. Then it says Chag. And remember, that's the festival. It's to keep a festival. Any of the festivals, right? And it's from the root that means to spin around in a circle and be giddy. You remember all that stuff from chapter 12? Maybe not. Maybe you weren't with us in chapter 12. Go back and look at it. Maybe I don't remember if I went into detail or not. But anyway, that's the idea. It's supposed to be fun. We were talking about that last week. It's supposed to be fun. We're supposed to be having pageantry and a good time, and maybe we should be dressing up for this stuff, I'm just throwing that out there. Then it says Ha Matzot. So it's the feast of Matzot. Well, what's Matzot? That's unleavened bread. And they say in the Gesenius what is sweet, especially sweet, i.e. unfermented bread, such as used at the Passover. Yeah, that's what we're talking about. The Feast of Unleavened Bread is the Passover. It's just another title for it. There's a lot of things have more than one title. I mean, I call my dog Boo Boo and Skeeter and Bubba Boo and Biggie Boo, right? I'm just throwing it out there. Well, Passover, Pesach, has another title, Ha-Matzot, the Matzot, the Feast of Unleavened Bread. You could say, well, technically it's two different ones because the Pesach is the first night and unleavened bread lasts for a week after it. Okay. But the Jews from the beginning have kind of mixed them together and call them, it's interchangeable, and that's okay. That's allowed in our religion. All right, so then it says, Tishamor, you shall keep it. That's a keep, to watch, to guard. It's of a man tending to his garden. Remember those words? It's about plucking away the bad so that the good can grow up. You're pulling out the weeds. That's the bad, by the way. And then without the weeds choking out the good stuff grows, right? So this is the idea of keeping, but it's guarding, like guarding something that is precious and special to you. You get a little rock out in your backyard and turns out it's solid gold. You might want to guard that a little bit. Put it in the safe. I don't know. So then it's Shivat. That's the Hebrew word for seven. 7. That looks funny from looking at it backwards on my monitor. It looks really weird. Then it says Yamim for 7 days. You keep the matzot for 7 days. Because that's Yom, which is day. Yamim, that's day in plural, days. Then it says Tochal, so you shall eat it for 7 days. What do you eat? The matzot, the unleavened bread. And, that's what it says. Oh, imagine that. That was our next word, matzot. Then it says Asher Tizviticha, that I command you. This is God giving the commandment. I sometimes wonder how we can live in a world where nobody's allowed to give people commandments, not even God. You've got to ask yourself, how likely is it that God would come down and give his people all these commandments, throw his hands up and say, you know what, that didn't work out so well. I'm going to start a new thing and not give anybody any commandments. I'm just throwing that out there, just saying. But this is, I command you. This is God saying, I commanded this. I, God, not me being God, but pointing upward. I, God, because I have to speak for him because he's not speaking for himself at the moment. Anyway, this is Le Moed. That's appointed times. They're appointed. God commanded them. God appointed them. And he also said they were forever. Ever. Not until Jesus came and died and did everything for us so that we don't have to do it. Come on, you've got to know that's false teaching. Even a Christian has got, if he thinks about it, well, no, that's false doctrine. because God does not change. If he said it was forever, forever didn't stop at the cross. It's still moving on. So it's appointed times by God himself. Chodesh. And that's a new moon. We think of it as a month in our world, but it's a new moon. Then it says Ha-Aviv. So it's a very specific one. See, operations in some of the festivals, because there's nothing wrong with celebrating festivals that are not in the Bible. Oh, Rob, we don't do that. 4th of July, Memorial Day. Yes, we do. And there's nothing wrong with doing that. Those are not pagan holidays. Those are American holidays that Americans celebrate because of their, I want to say conquest, but that's not really the right word. They're celebrating victory, right? And that's what Hanukkah is all about. We're celebrating victories that we couldn't possibly have won for ourselves. That's what the Feast of Dedication is. Every time in the Hebrew Bible, from start to finish in the Hebrew Bible, every time the Jews won back their temple, because it happens a number of times, I'm just saying. But every time they won it back, they had to rededicate it. They rededicated it when they built the tabernacle in the wilderness. Well, that wasn't a rededication. That was a dedication, right? And so everything else kind of been a rededication ever since. But they did it because God had given them a victory that they couldn't possibly have won on their own. God gave them the victory over Egypt. And the next thing you know, they're building a tabernacle. He gave them the victory over the Amorites and the Chickbites and the Tiggerbites, and they built them a temple. And you get the idea? All right, so this one, though, is specific. You're going to celebrate this when the month of Aviv, the Hebrew month of Aviv, when that starts. It's going to be difficult for you to figure that out if you don't get a Jewish calendar. I'm just saying. But you need to know when that starts, because that's when you're supposed to do this, because God commanded it. And God said it was forever. And so we probably should be doing this every time the month of Aviv rolls around. Just throwing that in there, just saying. But Hanukkah's not like that. It's not mandated by God. It's like the 4th of July. They're celebrating their victory. And their victory did not come through a war. Yes, they fought 2 small skirmishes and won. And God had to have been behind it, because there's no way they could have beat the Romans otherwise. They were outgunned, outmanned, out everything. I mean, the guys that do the war planning, what's that called? Well, the generals and stuff. But I mean, the strategic, they were out strategized, and still they won. That had to be God. These big bad army, this would be like, I don't know, some small town in South America getting together and beating the American army. I mean, it's mind-boggling. This should never have happened. But that's not why they got back their temple. They got back their temple because the son of Antiochus killed Antiochus. And when he killed Antiochus, he's like, you know what? There's nobody on this planet that wants that temple but the Jews. It's theirs. Why don't we just give it to them? And then we don't have to fight a war. And you know how we know that? Because we found the paperwork recently in an archaeological dig. So we know that it was of mutual benefit between the Jews and the son of Antiochus who killed his father Antiochus. We know that. We also know that there was no miracle of the lights. That doesn't come until 900 years later that story even surfaced. 900 years, people. There was no. What they were celebrating was this victory that God gave them. They didn't even have to fight a real war to win this. In fact, the skirmishes may not have even been necessary, but maybe they were. Maybe that's what convinced the son of Antiochus that it wasn't worth going to war over. Who knows? It probably all just kind of played together the way it does. But the point is, they're celebrating a victory that they couldn't have won without God. And I think that when Aviv rolls around, we really need to sit down and think, has God given us a victory? Or do we think in our arrogance that we did this? I'm just throwing that out there. But anyway, God's saying, do this on this specific date. Hanukkah's not on a specific date. So we do make that separation. That's all I was really trying to point out in the first place. Then the word that means because in Hebrew, ki, is next. Then it says bechodesh, because in that new moon. So now he's going to tell you why he wants you to celebrate it on that new moon. Because in that new moon, Ha'aviv, the one called Aviv, Yatzata, literally it's go forth you. So we would say you went forth in English. You went forth where? Me meets Rayim. You went forth from Egypt. You celebrate it because that's when it happened. So with some Jews, they want to celebrate Hanukkah at a very specific time because that's when it happened. Well, but think about how many times God gave the Jews a victory they couldn't possibly have won on their own. Man, if we did that and had to physically celebrate every time we won a victory, we would be having Hanukkah twice a month, every month of the year. And maybe you guys can afford that, but I'm telling you, Donna and I can't afford that. Jeepers, it's an expensive holiday. Anyway, just throwing some levity in there. Here's my translation of verse 18. You shall keep the feast of Matzot. It's a commandment. You shall keep the feast of Matzot. Period. Next verse. 7 days you shall eat Matzot at the appointed time, which I commanded you. On the new moon of Aviv, for it was the new moon of Aviv that you went forth from Mitzrayim, that you went forth from Egypt. And we can compare that to the other verse in, this came up in 23:15. I forgot about that. You shall keep the feast of Matzot. 7 days you shall eat Matzot, as I have commanded you, at the appointed time in the month of Aviv. For in it you came forth out of Mitzrayim, and you will not appear before me without an offering. That's Exodus 23:15. So you're not being reminded about the offering here. You're not being given any information that you didn't already have. This is at least the third time we've heard this, right? Because repetition is a really good teacher. And so the point here is repetition. All right, of the words Feast of Matzot, which is also unleavened bread, also called that, the Feast of Matzot begins on Pesach, which commences on the first new moon of the biblical year of Aviv. Rashi said this was the time of the year when the grain matured and the first fruits began to ripen. Of the words, you went forth from Mitzrayim, Kasuto pointed out that the Canaanites also celebrated the Feast of Unleavened Bread. He also said that the reason why the object comes before and not after the verb is to express antithesis. The reason for this distinction is obvious in that the Canaanites celebrated their God giving them something to eat, and the Jews celebrated their liberation from Mitzrayim. It's a very important distinction as far as I'm concerned, because we are not celebrating the God of the harvest. We are celebrating the God who gave us the victory. We're celebrating the actual moment in time when God delivered us from bondage. We are not celebrating the harvest and thanking the crop gods like the Canaanites were for giving them another crop. It's very important that we know this. All right, verse 19. All firstborn wombs to me, and all livestock you shall remember firstborn ox and flock. Again, something we've already had. Kol, which is all its totality, and then it's Peter. Now, if you look at the way I spelled that in English, you'd say, wait a minute, that's Peter. P-E-T-E-R. No, it's Peter. It's firstborn. That's what you think of. It's the firstborn. Rechem, the firstborn from the womb. It says li, to me. The firstborn of the womb is, we might say, for me. God's saying it's for me. Mik necha. So, vecho. I missed. So all the firstborn of the womb are for me. And then he says, and all mik necha, livestock you. So, and all your livestock. So it's all of your firstborn children, and then all of your firstborn livestock. Tizahar, you shall remember. It's to remember, to recollect, to bring to mind. What are we going to remember? Peter, firstborn. Shor, which means ox. Vaseh, and that's the word for sheep, really, but they use it of a flock of sheep and goat, because in the Hebrew world, sheep and goat are the very same thing. Just throwing that out there. All right, so your translation is, all the firstborn of the womb is for me. And that's God talking, not Robert. And from all your livestock you shall remember the firstborn ox and sheep. So we're going to compare that to sanctify to me every firstborn breaching every womb among the children of Yisrael. So that's obviously talking of the children. Among mankind and among the livestock. It, speaking of the firstborn son of Yisrael, it is mine, or he is mine. So the law, sanctify every firstborn Yisraeli, every Jew, every Jewish male, and every firstborn male of the livestock that belongs to Yisraeli, that belongs to Israel. Rashbam said that in early Israel, the priestly functions were performed by the firstborn sons. He didn't say that until way late in the game, so he may or may not be right. There is a comment in my Onkelos that says the firstborn son of the mother, not the father, hence the biblical use of the word womb. I just thought I'd throw that in there because I found it. All right, verse 20. Let's see. Yeah, we got plenty of time. And firstborn donkey you shall redeem with lamb, and if not, you shall redeem and break you. All firstborn sons you shall redeem, and not he see they faces my empty. So we're going to see that we may or may not remember. So it's ve peter. So it's and firstborn hamor. That's a donkey. So the firstborn donkey ti pedeh. You shall redeem. You're being told you will redeem this, because you're like, oh, Fuyon Yui, I'm not going to pay, I'm not that. I got a feeling you make an offering whether you like it or not. I'm just saying. It's said with a lamb. So what's being said here is every time, your firstborn donkey, you're going to make an offering for that donkey. And that offering is going to be the price of a lamb. You can either give a lamb of the first year without blemish, or you can pay for a lamb of the first year. So if the lamb cost $1.50, then your offering is $1.50. If the lamb cost $1,050, your offering is $1,050. Now, wait a minute, Rob. What do poor people do? I think we're going to find out. Ve'im, and if not, ti pedeh, you shall redeem. So if you're not going to do it, va'arafto, and break you. You will break, to pluck, to seize, to pull, to break the neck of an animal, figuratively, to overthrow, to destroy altars. Then it says kol, that's all, behor, that's firstborn, benecha, all the sons you saw, and So we finished that thought. Now we're on to, and all of your firstborn sons, tipede, you will redeem them. Velo ra'u, he see they, literally. I don't remember why this is here. Phane, oh. Okay, let's see. And to see the face of a king instead of his ministers who are received in his presence. So it's to be in the presence of, to be before their king, if you will. Phane or pane. This is to be in the presence of, because this is the word for face. So you're not going to be before the faces of. You will not see, you'll not present yourself in the presence of. Rekam, that's empty. So you're not going to do this empty. All right. Obviously there was an idiom in there, right? And you shall redeem the firstborn donkey with a lamb. And if you do not redeem, you will make it a pet. Remember the break its neck? You're not supposed to kill your donkey. Come on, folks, doing that. There's no reason in it. There's no purpose in it. That's not the point. The point is sometimes people aren't good with their money and they can't afford to pay that price. Sometimes people don't have the money and can't afford to pay that price. So all God is saying, if you're not going to make an offering for that firstborn donkey, or you can't, then what you do is you make that firstborn donkey a pet. It's not supposed to have a yoke around its neck pulling the plow. It's not supposed to have a big heavy wad of things on its back carrying it into town for you. You shouldn't even be riding it. It's just going to have to be a pet. That's to break its neck. It's an idiom. So, and if you do not redeem this firstborn donkey with a lamb, you'll make it a pet. Then it went on to say, you shall redeem all your firstborn sons. Doesn't make any difference how poor you are, you're going to redeem your sons. And none of the sons will appear before me without the redemption offering. So when you bring your son and present him to the priest, there is a redemption offering. Now, it doesn't tell us what that is here. So if we can also see that one other time it said, and all that breach a donkey shall be redeemed with a sheep. And if they do not redeem it, they shall make it a pet. They'll break its neck. Also, you shall redeem all your firstborn sons. Again, this verse did not, and I forgot to tell myself which one it was, but it was something from earlier. Rashi pointed out that Leviticus 27:6 tells us that a newborn son is redeemed for the price of 5 shekels. Shekels of gold equal in weight to 220 grains, which is 1/10,000th of a talent. This is not me. Shekels of silver in weight are equal in weight to 132 grains, which is 1/3,000th of a talent. Shekels of copper are equal in weight to 528 grains, which is 1/1500th of a talent. See, but you get the point here. Your son's not costing you much. Poor people can afford this. The Sephorno applied the law of not redeeming the donkey to not redeeming the son, in that if a son was not redeemed, he was not to have a secular job. Again, something written, this was actually written fairly recent in history, very long after the fact. I don't agree with it at all. Rashi said that a man had to take an axe and kill his donkey as punishment for not giving a sheep or its price. It's because, again, Rashi did not speak the language. He did not know the most basic of Hebrew idioms. He was using the Onkelos, which was written in a very terse manner, in a very literal manner. They call it terse now, but they mean literal by it. And basically, what happened when the Onkelos was written, everything that was Jewish was written right out of his translation. So you get to the Dark Ages, and illiteracy is rampant. The guys you're calling sages don't even speak the language. They don't write in that language. They don't know the most basic of things from their history. And they're trying to find a way to make people Jewish. So they made a bunch of stuff up. They applied things improperly, and we Jews are following it to this day. Well, some of us are, I'm not. But anyway, the Sephorno at least seems to get the idiomatic nature of break its neck in the Bible. To break the neck of Moab was to defeat it, not kill anyone in it. I think they were onto something, but I didn't really get the feeling that it quite got it. What I see here is a clear exception to God's initial law. The firstborn male of the livestock is to be given to God, except if it is a donkey. A donkey can be kept back, but it cannot be a working animal. I think if the sages would have noticed this more clearly, that the phrase, also you shall redeem all your firstborn sons, was added to show that God makes no exceptions for male Israelis. Okay. Verse 21, 6 days shall serve, and day the seventh you shall rest in plowing, and in harvest you shall rest. This is important. Shishet, that's your Hebrew word for 6. Yamim, that's days in plural. So 6 days. Ta'avod. Here, Eved, Avodah, you hear all those words in there. Ta'avod, shall serve, to labor, to work, to do. It's of the thing, to bestow labor on anything, to till a field, a vineyard, a garden. You don't work. Then it says, Uvayom, and this is, and in day, literally. And in the day, ha shivi'i, and in the, that's the seventh. So in the day, the seventh. So in the seventh day is how we would say it. Tishbot, and this is a command, you shall rest. In the seventh day, you shall rest. By the way, for those of you who don't know, Sunday is not the seventh day of the week. Sunday is the first day of the week. To this day, Sunday is still the first day of the week, not the seventh. Just thought I'd throw that out there. So it's rest. I don't know if you can hear the Shabbat in there, but if you take the T part off the front of it, all you're left with is Shabbat. But it's a word for rest, to keep as a day of rest. The primary idea appears to be that of to sit down, to sit still. It's used of the opposite of labor, to cease, to desist. Then it's beharish, in plowing. I'm going to give some examples. Remember, this is not specific. Okay, well, it says we can't plow, but it doesn't say we can't wash a car. Come on, people. These are just the examples. In plowing, uba, ka, zir, and in the harvest. You know, you got to cease from this stuff. Even in the harvest, tish boat, it's saying the word again. You shall rest. It's a command. You shall. So your translation is 6 days you shall work. Are you hearing that? You got a command to work 6 days. Well, if you're off to rest from plowing, and from the harvest you shall rest. Again, these are examples. These are not the only things you rest from. All right, so we're going to compare that to Exodus 31:15. 6 days he does, I have occupational work. But the seventh day is a Shabbat, Shabbaton. It's a Sabbath. So I have major rest because that's what the English tends to write. It's a major rest. It says it's holy to Yahweh. I'm ahead here. All who do occupational work on the Shabbat day, then it says die, he dies, literally. So that's obviously that's an idiom. Die, he dies. What does that mean? Cuts himself off from God and country. Cuts himself off from God and country. This is the basis of doing what God said not to do and not doing what God said to do. You cut yourself off from God and country. You don't go to hell. Fire doesn't come from the sky and post your toasties. No, you cut yourself off from God. Occupational work of those words. The Babylonian Talmud says in the tractate Sabbath 73a, it gives a list of 40 occupational works less one. So it's 39. In other words, major rest. Rashi said it was a complete rest, not a casual rest. I can't even wrap my head around that one. Isn't rest casual? Anyway, the Bible does tell us to work for our rest. Just saying it does. Cassuto wrote, the Bible wished to rule that the work of harvesting, the Bible wished to rule that the work of harvesting, despite its importance, should not override the Sabbath. Even at plowing time and harvest time, you shall cease from labor. I don't really think that's what it's doing. I think it's giving us an example, but I'm not saying Cassuto's wrong either. I think that there's a good point here to be had. You work 6 days. On the 7th day, you rest. It does not matter if you're worried about the big flood that's coming and may wash away your crop. It's not about the big freeze that's coming and you're going to worry about your crop being frozen. We're people who are taught by Torah to live, to prepare for the worst, to prepare for the future, and to live with life as it comes. You prepare, do all that you can do, and then on that 7th day, you sit down and you rest, and you let God take care of the rest. And yeah, sometimes it goes badly. But if you did what you were supposed to, you have the comfort in knowing you did what was right. All right, 22. And feast Shavuot shall make to you first fruits, harvest, wheat, and feast the ingathering revolution that year. I think we've had this, but it says V'chag, and that's your word for and, literally it's and feast, but it's a festival. It's the keeping of a festival, the dancing in a circle, being giddy and all that. And the feast of what? Shavuot, which is, it's called a lot of things. It's called the Feast of Weeks, and because it's from the root word for 7, right? The period of, it's even used for a period of 7 years, because 7 is your basic idea here. So you have, anyway, I think you get the idea. Ta'aseh, we've already had this. That's shall make or shall do. It's properly to labor, to work about, to make, to produce by labor, to manufacture. Actually, I think that's the first time we've had that word today. But anyway, it says lecha, to you, bi kurei, first fruits, used of first fruits of grain, the first fruits gathered from the field and the trees, especially the first fruits offered to God. There is something added, bread baked from the first fruits. The day of first fruits, used of it, which is also called Pentecost. All right, so we have Kezir, harvest. We got the first fruits of the harvest. Chitim, that's wheat. The first fruits of wheat. V'hag, and the feast Ha'asif, We call that the ingathering. It's the harvest, the gathering of fruit. And by the way, fruit's not just fruit trees. If you've grown vegetables and you're harvesting them, the vegetables are the fruit of your labor, right? So the fruit of the vine that they grew on, just like grapes are called the fruit of the vine. So anyway, then it says tekufat, which is revolution. It's a circuit. It's a going around. It's the seasons, right? You got the 4 seasons. They go basically in a circle. Hasana, that year, the year. So our translation, and you shall accomplish the feast of Shavuot for you, the first fruits of the wheat harvest, and the feast of ingathering at the circling of a year. At the circling of a year, or cycling, you could say that. The Feast of Shavuot is sometimes called the Feast of Weeks because there are exactly 7 weeks between Pesach and Shavuot. It is also called the Feast of Pentecost by Christians because the feast takes place on the Penta, the 50th day after Pesach. Of the words first fruits of the feast of, Rashi said the feast of the harvest is Shavuot, and the feast of the ingathering was Sukkot. He also said that 2 loaves were baked and brought to the temple for each feast. The first fruits of the wheat harvest were baked from wheat, while the first fruits of Pesach offering were baked from barley. This could be true. I highly doubt it. I think that this comes from people reading Onkelos and who wrote everything in a very literal manner, and them understanding everything in a literal manner have now turned one thing into 2 things. That's more likely the issue here. But anyway, he could be right. Of the words, the circling, or as some say, Onkelos and Saadia translate the Hebrew to mean the end of the year, while even Ezra and Rashi translate it as the cycling of the year. I am with them, it is cycling. And the feast of the harvest, the first fruits of your labors that you sow in the field, and the feast of the ingathering, which is at the Betzeh, which is the word for end, of the year, when you have gathered from your fields. So that's taking it from Exodus 23:16. And in Exodus 23:16, he is using the word for end. So you understand why 2 guys are saying end and 2 guys are saying cycling. Because the other version of this command says end of the year, and this one we just went through says cycling of the year. What they should teach us is that the end of the year is the end of the cycle. Just throwing that out there. Even Ezra and the Sephono point out that the Feast of Ingathering is the end of the agricultural year. Almost said archaeological. End of the agricultural year, not the calendar year. That's a good point. All right. Then we have verse 23. 3 times in year he sees all male you, faces the Lord Yahweh, God's Israel. Now we've certainly had this one before. Shalosh, that's the Hebrew word for 3. Pa'amim, not neem like face, meme, pa'amim. So it's 3 times, 3 repetitions, right? 3 times. Bashana, 3 times in year. Now in Hebrew, you don't have to say the year. We would say 3 times in the year. Not necessary in Hebrew. I once had a girl come to me. She had just started taking classes at the college down the road from where we were. And she came to me and asked me a question about a Hebrew word, and I told her, and she said, but the word the is, how did she put that? It's inflected. It's, we know that it's supposed to be there. I said, no, we don't. It's not supposed to be there. We don't use it in Hebrew. And she went to her professor, who told her I was wrong. Look, when you're learning Hebrew, most of the time you're learning from someone who doesn't speak Hebrew. I find that to be true more often than not. I may be wrong about the statistics there, but I think I'm right. But these people don't speak the language, and when they're translating it, they're adding words like the and as and with and things like that. They're adding these words because it helps us to understand it in English. But those words are not necessary in the Hebrew language. The word the, you could actually speak Hebrew, the word ha in Hebrew, which means the, it's the definite article. You could literally speak that language without ever using the definite article and not be wrong. You wouldn't grammatically be right in some cases, but you wouldn't be wrong. It wouldn't be necessary. People that speak Hebrew would understand you with it, without it altogether. You can leave the k sound off, that means as. You can leave that off every single word that you speak. I mean, every time it would occur. And people in Hebrew are going to understand you. We don't need those words. We don't need is. We don't need that. We don't need the. Those are not assumed to be there. They're not. I wish I could think of the word. I can't think of it. But in this language, those words are not necessary. They're only necessary when you write it down for grammar reasons. And in Hebrew, they didn't have grammar until the 600s AD. 600s AD. They spoke the language without grammar for a lot of years. And there's going to be people that are going to jump up and down and say, oh, well, they had grammar. It just wasn't written down. No, you can't prove that. That's just what you want to believe. Anyway, our next word is Yera'eh. So it's he sees literally. We had this word a while ago. That's to see, to be seen in the presence of a king, a set of his ministers, and things like that. It's used in different ways. This kol is all, zehur ha, male you, so it's your males is the way we say it. Et, there's your pointer. Penei, there's faces, so it's going to be presence. Ha-adon, the Lord. The Lord. And then it says God's name, Yahweh. The Lord, Yahweh. Then it says Elohe, God's. Yahweh, God, we would say in singular in English. Yisrael. He is the God of Yisrael. He is not the God of the Christians. Hey, I didn't say it. That's what the word says, right? And if it's infallible, inspired, and inerrant, then he is only the God of the Jews. Just throwing it out there. He's only the God of Yisrael. And you know that came up over history, right? Because that's why the whole argument about Christians being the new Israel. And where we live is the new Jerusalem. That's why that came about. Because there were people saying, wait a minute, if God never changes and he's the God of Israel, how is he the God of you? Anyway, the translation of 23 is 3 times in a year all your males will appear before the Lord Yahweh God of Israel. You can compare that to Exodus 23:17. 3 times in a year all your males shall appear before the Lord Yahweh. Here again, Rashi writes that the 3 feasts are to be attended during the sabbatical year. No doubt there were some who argued the 3 appearances were not necessary on a year when there was no harvest. I'm with Rashi on this one. Shouldn't we worship our God in the years of plenty as well as the years of not so much? This sabbatical year will be the year of not so much. The pseudo argued that the word Adon was used in antithesis of the disagree with him any more than I do. You know why? Because God is God. He created it all. He made what was right and what was wrong, and he does not have to kowtow to any of the Canaanites, the Chickbites, or the Tiggerbites. He does not have to do anything to separate himself from them. What he does is right. If they happen to do something that seems like the same, they stole it from him. He did not steal it from them. Just throwing that out there. All right. I do not think I have time to go through this one. It's pretty big. This is a good one too. All right. Well, if you still love me and want to hear from me, I'll see you next time. Shalom, shalom, y'all.